Good morning. Just a moment. Okay, great. So you can hear me. Looks like some of you are already pressing 1. Keep pressing 1 if you can hear me. Okay, good. We got a few 1s. If you can see me, can you press 2? Oh, good. Okay. If you can't hear me, can you press 0? Aha, no zeros. Okay, what I'm going to do is looks like my screen is already being shared. So I can see all the 1s and 2s while I share my screen. What I'll do is I'll go through this presentation. At the end, I'm going to go reference the chat box to see any questions that you might have. Okay, so let's begin. So as Abby already shared, that Abby and I will be speaking both this morning, and I'm going to get us started off looking and thinking about academic writing and research. So what I want to do is cover 3 different topics. The first topic is going to be on writing. That's going to be the bulk of the content that we're going to look at together. After that, we're going to review the assignment that was sent out in the welcome packet. And then we'll conclude by sharing a few different resources that might be helpful for you when conducting your research. Okay. So let's begin. So most of us, we have a expectation of what academic writing should look like. We have an expectation for how the sentences should sound, for what kind of words we should be using. When we read a sentence, we all have an expectation for what a good academic sentence should look like. So what I want to do is I want to look at a couple sentences that I think fill our expectation of good scholarship. Okay? What I can do is I can share my screen more fully, but after I read this, I would like everyone to try to listen very carefully to this sentence. It's a complicated sentence. And then we'll pause for about 15 seconds, and then in the chat box, I'm going to switch back to it. Write one word describing the content of the sentence, just as a small exercise. So I'm going to read a sentence. We're going to pause. You're going to write in the chat box the heart of the sentence, the essential meaning of it. And then we're going to do that with a second sentence. Okay? So let's start. I'm going to share this just a little bigger so people can see. Oh, push the wrong button. Okay. So this quote comes from a philosopher named Judith Butler. I believe she's teaching at the University of California at Berkeley. And she's been named to be one of the smartest people in the world. That's a pretty big compliment. This particular sentence comes from an article she wrote called Further Reflections on the Conversations of Our Time. Here it is. Further reflections on the conversations of our time. Okay? So I'm going to read the sentence, and we're going to just pause and listen, and then write in the chat box one word that you think describes the heart of the sentence. The move from a structuralist account in which capital is understood to structure social relations in relatively homologous ways, to a view of hegemony in which power relations are subject to repetition, convergence, and rearticulation, brought the question of temporality into the thinking of structure, and marked a shift from a form of Althusserian theory that takes structural totalities as theoretical objects, to one in which the insights into the contingent possibility of structure inaugurate a renewed conception of hegemony as bound up with the contingent sites and strategies of the rearticulation of power. Okay? That's a long sentence. It's a complicated sentence. Do the best you can to give a one-word response in the chat box as to what the sentence is talking about. I'm going to switch over now to see if I can see some comments. Let's take another 15 seconds for responses. You are not getting evaluated on this, so there's no wrong answers. All right, structure. All right, nice. And remember, if you are just logging in, we just read a sentence. We just read together a sentence from Judith Butler, a long sentence. And I'm just asking everyone just to try to guess, if not know, the meaning of the sentence in one word. And we're going to put it in this chat box here. So we have one theory saying it's about structure. I think that's a very good idea. Strategy, also a very good idea. Method, great. Love the thinking. And let's take another just moment, and then I want to try to do that with another sentence as well. Shift, okay, it's a good one. Okay. I love all the ideas. Let's try it one more time on a different sentence. And this is meant to be not the easiest exercise. So if you're sitting at your computer screen and being like, wow, I have no idea, that's totally good. Okay, so let's try one more sentence. And once you have the idea, type it into the chat box. Okay? I'm going to zoom in so we can see it better. This is a sentence that came from a professor named Baba, a professor of English literature at the University of Chicago. I think the sentence also gives a nice presentation, I think, of what we assume academic writing to look like. Okay, this appears in the Location of Culture, written by Professor Baba. I'm going to read the sentence, try to follow along as I read it out loud, and then we're going to shift back to the chat box and give it another try. Okay, here we go. If, for a while, the ruse of desire is calculable for the uses of discipline, soon the repetition of guilt, justification, pseudo-scientific theories, superstition, spurious authorities, and classifications can be seen as the desperate effort to, quote, normalize formally the disturbance of a discourse, of splitting that violates the rational, enlightened claims of its an enunciatory modality. I'm going to leave it on the screen for just a moment. I'm going to switch back to the chat box to see what you think. Okay, normalize. Good. Classification, gospel. Okay, these are good ideas. Classification, very good. And let's take another 30 seconds before moving on to talk about these sentences together. Modality, very good. Modality, very nice. Discipline. Okay, very good. Okay, so we've had some very good ideas so far. And for those that are having trouble hearing, keep fiddling around with it. I think our support staff will be in touch with you about how to help you hear better. But we're going to carry along with the PowerPoint and follow along in the text as best you can if it's hard to hear. So what I want to do now is I'm going to shift back to the PowerPoint. And I wanted to point out to everyone that these two sentences are our stereotype, our expectation of what good academic writing is. Right, they're written by a professor at Berkeley, and it was written by a professor at Chicago, both very prestigious universities in the United States. Yet when I shared the sentences out loud, we had many different understandings about the meaning of it. Just to go back for a second to Professor Butler, that sentence that we read that begins the move from is one paragraph long. That sentence is one paragraph long. That's a very long sentence, right? And they're using words, Althusserian, hegemony, homologous, inaugurate. Too many words, too long of a sentence. This person is one of the smartest people in the world, and nobody understands their sentence. Or if they do, it's not clear whether they totally understand it. Right? Same thing with Professor Babak. So there's a couple of things we can reflect on that. One is that we can tell ourselves, oh, this academic writing is just too hard. It's too hard to follow. It's too hard to understand. I think it's really easy to feel that because these professors are so well established. But what I would like to suggest is that the writing is lacking an element of clarity that good writing should possess. Now, I don't want to get into an intellectual boxing match with either of these people because I'm sure they would defeat me. But what I can say is that the writing does not communicate clearly their message. That's something I can say, and I think they would agree with me. Right? It looks very beautiful on a page, and it's somewhat impressive, the words and their style of writing, but it's not totally comprehensible. So what I wanted to point out at the very bottom of this is that language is usually expressed in two different ways, through its content and through its form. I believe Abby will be touching on this in some way as she speaks. But content is the idea. Content is the idea that somebody wants to communicate, and the form is the way in which they communicate it. Right? I have little doubt that the content that these professors are articulating is brilliant. But the form that they communicated the idea makes it almost impossible to understand. So when we try to write, I think we both want to communicate something of an interesting idea that would be expressed in content, and we want to put it into a form that's comprehensible. Okay? So I want to shift to a principle that I would like to share with you when considering academic writing and the writing that you would do for us. Okay? This is a principle called KISS. This is actually an idea that a friend of mine almost 13 years ago shared with me that his teacher told him. The KISS principle. Keep it simple, silly. Keep it simple. Silly. This is an idea that was popularized in the United States by someone named Kelly Johnson, who I believe was working as an engineer for the U.S. Navy in 1960. Keep it simple. This person is an engineer, right? And the fundamental idea behind keep it simple, silly is that most systems work best if they are kept simple rather than made complicated. Therefore, simplicity should be a key goal in design, and unnecessary complexity should be avoided. I'm going to read that one more time and try to follow along as I read. Most systems work best if they are kept simple rather than made complicated. Therefore, simplicity should be a key goal in design, and unnecessary complexity should be avoided. Okay, this is a person who's writing almost 60 years ago. They're speaking about engineering, but this is a principle that was also shared with me in terms of writing. Right? We have these two brilliant professors that we referenced before. Their ideas are brilliant, but the structure, the form of it is overly complicated, which makes it inaccessible. Okay? And I'm going along with the idea that the purpose of writing is to communicate something. And if someone can't communicate something, then they're having trouble using the language. Okay? At the bottom is a quote from a North American author. His name is Jack Kerouac. He was popular, I believe, in the 50s and the 60s. In the United States, he's still very popular, but he was writing almost 60, 70 years ago. And he shares a very similar idea to the KISS principle. One day, I will find the right words, and they will be simple. Almost surprising from a writer, right? I think our assumption is that writing should model what these scholars that we just referenced should look like. What I'm suggesting is something else, which is communicated by the author Jack Kerouac and the KISS principle, which is to keep it simple. What I want to do is to look at a poem written by Han Shan in the Tang Dynasty in the 9th century. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Han Shan. I'm probably saying his name horribly, so forgive me for my bad pronunciation. Okay. Han Shan wrote in the 9th century, and the scholar we just looked at, Jack Kerouac, he studied Han Shan. Jack Kerouac wrote in the 20th century in the United States, and he studied Han Shan in the 9th century. Okay, Jack Kerouac is an American studying a Chinese thinker almost over 1,000 years before. Okay, and this is how the poem goes. Every single thing has uses. When you use it right. Use it the way it's not intended. First it wanes and then it drains. A round hole for a square handle is pretty sad. Just an empty failure. The more glorious war horse ever sat can't match a crippled kitty in a race to catch a rat. I'm going to read that one more time, and then I want to switch back to our chat box and do a very quick review of what it means. Okay. Every single thing has uses. When you use it right. Use it the way it's not intended. First it wanes and then it drains. A round hole for a square handle is pretty sad. Just an empty failure. The most glorious war horse ever sat can't match a crippled kitty in a race to catch a rat. I'm going to switch back. If you could share a word about its meaning, I'd love to hear what you're thinking. And you can, there's no right answer. There's lots of ways to interpret it. If you want to reply in the chat box with an opinion, go ahead. And we're going to switch back to the PowerPoint in about 30 seconds. Yeah, I'll switch back. Good. Argument, uses, beautiful. Precision, beautiful. You. Yes. Argument. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, great. Keep churning. I think what everyone is saying is correct, right? Every single thing has uses. That's how the poet starts the sentence, right? And everything can do a task that fits it, right? It concludes by saying that a cat who has a hard time walking, right? A cat that has a hard time walking can actually do better in catching a mouse than a horse, right? And I think that's true also for writing. Language has a purpose, which is to communicate something, and when used right, it can catch a rat. Right? When used incorrectly, it has a hard time catching a rat. It has a hard time getting its message across. Okay. So this is the principle that I want us to think about when we are considering our own writing. Okay. So I'm going to switch now to the academic assignment, which I believe everyone has received. This was in our initial welcome packet. Okay, I'm going to read it together in case you haven't had a chance to look at it. And it begins like this. Please select a topic of international significance to you. This topic could be one of the 3 Model G20 topics or your own interested area. Write an essay to address how you would like to see G20 countries address this challenge. What do you want the G20 countries to do to address this world problem? Why do you want to see it addressed by these G20 countries? Why the G20 countries? Why not other countries? And the assignment asks to conclude by describing and explaining 2 strategies that you think would be most effective for making this change. Right, so if somebody really wants to say that they want to really address climate change, then write how you would like to see the G20 countries address it. Why the G20 countries? And if there's a couple strategies that you can emphasize to say how this would be the best way to deal with it. That's what we're looking for. Something simple, something using the KISS principle. Not trying to emulate the academic writing of these other principles, but to communicate an idea. Okay. So we have written at the bottom, when doing your research, please feel free to draw on resources from the library and the internet. And in the packet that you should have received already was a list of resources that you can reference for your research. The readings are all recommended, but they're not necessary. So if you feel like there's a lot to read, you don't have to read it. It's just to help get you to think. Okay, but you don't have to read it. But we want to offer some different things for you to read and think about before coming and before writing. So the essay should be in a Word document. We have at the bottom in a doc or docx, 500 to 700 words in 12-point font. Okay, and we're very excited to take a look at your writing. I'm not going to review this. This is already in your welcome packet. But we're hoping that you can submit your assignment in the Edmodo account by January 25th. Okay, and there's a couple submission instructions that are in your welcome packet, but you can submit it on what's called the Assignment Center. Okay, and if you have any questions, you can be in touch with us about that. Okay. I put a couple resources here that we thought might be helpful. Something that we want to encourage our students to consider, which is a part of our list of additional resources we included in the welcome packet. There's a couple other news sources to read as well. I think this is a summit that's reflecting global perspectives. So we want people to think about these topics maybe from different perspectives of the world as well. So feel free to reference the newspapers and magazines that you're used to using. And if you want to try other news sources, such as Time Magazine at time.com or Reuters, theeconomist.com, these are other resources that you might find helpful and interesting when compiling your paper. Okay? So just as a short summary, things that we would like to emphasize before you turn in your draft is to, firstly, I start at the very bottom. Keep it simple. Right? Keep it simple, because that's what makes good writing. Right? The content can be very interesting, but the form needs to be able to communicate an idea, and that's what I hope you can take away from this. And have faith in your own writing. I'm going to go up from the bottom to the top. Have faith in your own writing. Right? Writing is a process. Writing is a hard process. And sometimes it doesn't come out as beautifully as we want or as clearly as we want. But that's okay. That's just the process of writing. And when you submit, it doesn't have to be perfect. Right? Just give it a try. And if you feel like you really don't like what you're producing, you can ask for help. That's totally fine from us or from other resources. Right? But have faith in your writing. We want it to be your writing, not somebody else's. And use citations if you are going to be referencing other sources, which we hope you are. Right? We want you to include where you're getting these ideas from. So if somebody is still interested in global climate change, and they think that 1 trillion tons of CO2 are released into the atmosphere every day by this country, just tell us where you got that idea from. Okay? And we hope that you'll try different resources while you're writing. A new newspaper, multiple newspapers, just to diversify some of the thinking. Okay? So that concludes my part of this presentation. Keep it simple, silly, the KISS principle. I hope that's the takeaway for you all. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom out of this box and look, and I'll take a handful of questions pending time if anybody has on the writing process, on any of the ideas that we discussed today, or any questions particularly about the assignment. Okay, I'm going to zoom out now. Quick and dirty tips. Oh no. I hope those are tears of happiness. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer them before handing the floor over to Abby. Okay. So keep shooting the questions this way, and I'll try to answer them as they come. Yes, the essay can contain diagrams if you think that would be helpful for communicating your idea. What is clarity? Sure, clarity, I will say, is the KISS principle. Is communicating an idea simply. Ren, I would say you can write about more than one idea, but you run a risk of deviating from the KISS principle. If we write about too many ideas, or too many topics, that is, we run the risk of lacking simplicity. Sometimes too many topics can interfere with that. But if you think you can, I'm not going to suggest that you don't. but I would recommend one if you can. Okay, good. Um, yeah, if you want to write on, oh, sorry, lots of chat boxes. Keep to the main point. That's correct. And yes, we want the essays to be no longer than 700 words because it takes a long time to write them. We want to be respectful of your time, and it also takes a long time to read them. So we want to be respectful of our own time, too. So we have a few more minutes. Will, I would keep it 700 words or less. If you really need to deviate, if you want to make it 750, I think that's fine, but don't go above that because it's going to be too much. It's going to be a different assignment if you take it much longer than that. Yes, we will be evaluating your essays. The structure of the essay, very good. Uh, I think we'll be discussing the structure some in the next presentation. But I think if you follow the questions as a part of the essay, then I think you will fall perfectly well into the structure. So if you identify the challenge that you're thinking about, that you think is important, if you can then express why you want G20 countries to be involved, and if you can express then how you would like these countries to address these challenges and the reasons why, then I think you're doing the assignment structurally just fine. And so the structure, I would say, just follow along the questions that were posed, and that'll be a perfectly fine structure. Okay. So the next question is, what are the rubrics for evaluating? I would say don't worry about the rubrics. I think the rubrics are based on clarity, like we're saying, the simplicity principle, but also the ability to answer the questions that we've posed. So both we're going to be looking at content and form. Okay. It's a little hard for only 1 point. What are your suggestions? Okay. Um, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I would say try to pick one topic, but you can make multiple points about that topic. Okay, so if you want to, again, I'm just using the example of global climate change, that could be your topic, but the way that you want to make an impact on global warming could have multiple points of suggestion, or the number of countries that you want to have involved could be multifaceted, and the reasons why you want the countries involved could be multifaceted as well. Android attendee, let me know if I've answered your question. Students will be getting their evaluations, yes, Ren. Could you clarify what peel is? I'm not sure if everyone understands that principle, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding the principle peel too before I can respond to it. Android, I'm not sure what kind of expectations you're writing about. Can you give more details? I would say if you're writing about expectations for how you think the world or these countries will address the issue, then I think that's fine. I think that's totally fine. Kelly, yes, argumentative writing, and that's something that's going to be talked about in the next presentation. And Artie, can you clarify your question? Peel. So we have Peel clarified. Peel stands for point, examples, explanation, link. I think if that's a principle that, if that's a structure that works for you, I would say use it. You don't have to, but I think that's a good one. Okay, and Artie is asking, uh, I think where, as a writer, should he be or she be in the writing of this? So I would say you can write from your own perspective, but your own perspective should be reflecting on objective things. Right? Again, you shouldn't make up the number of tons of CO2 being released into the atmosphere, but you can reflect on that as a person. No problem. We'll take 3 more questions. What I'd like to say is people are thinking about any final questions. Is that oh, here we got another one. If you can send it in Word, that's preferred, doc or docx. If you can't, send it in a PDF, because that will be a standardized way of reviewing your essay. So I'll just say again, I thank you, everyone. Do a doc or docx or send it in a PDF. Pages is fine, but sometimes there's problems with formatting. So I just recommend using one of the other document forms. So I want to say, everyone, thank you for, I'll answer your question in just a second, but I just want to say that thank you, everyone, for reading such hard academic writing with me. The sentences that I shared with you from these professors are extremely intimidating, but they're not intimidating because we don't really understand. I mean, that's why we're intimidated. But they weren't written in a way that helps others understand, and I hope that's what we can do when we write our assignments, is to write to help others understand. So what I'm going to do is now hand the floor over to Abby. If there's any further questions, we'll try to answer them in the next Q&A session. Keep sending them in the chat box. And thank you very much for your time.
Okay, everyone, let's talk about making an argument. Because we only have 13 minutes, I'll go through it very quickly. First, what is an argument? I think some of you or most of you have taken TOEFL exam. In your writing session, you'll probably be asked to write about an article and take a position about something you disagree or agree with. And you also have to write about the reasons or evidence to back up your argument. So an argument is a claim in an academic setting that is backed up by reasons. So from this very short sentence, you can see that there are three reasons, three elements for an argument. First, it is a claim. Second, it's reasons, and third is the link between the reasons you give and the claim. How well your reasons back up your claim. So let's talk about the 5 elements of the argument. First, you have to introduce the background of what you are arguing and what is your claim is. If you look at this list, you can see that the claim could be a lot of things. It could be a value. For example, do you agree whether it is right to have death penalty or not? Or it could also about a cause and effect. Or do you agree it is climate change that caused global warming? Or you can talk about what are the policy solutions to stabilize the financial system or economy. After you give your claim, you have to give the reasons and evidence for what you're arguing. And here I would like to emphasize the evidence, because nowadays anybody can post anything in the internet. And in our pre-submit essays, we do want you to use very respected resources, either from a rigorous academic research or from an expert in the field of the topic you're talking about. And then I would like to talk about counter argument. When you counter argue, it is the time that you think about someone else who might not agree with your argument, and you have to consider this person's perspective and defend your argument by pointing out why his argument is not correct or why you disagree with this person. This would actually strengthen your argument to another layer. After all this, you have to conclude or summarize all of your writings or all of your presentation. Let's look at this example. This is from the first page of the 2008 G20 Summit Leaders Declaration. They actually give a nice exemplar of how to make an argument. In the introduction session, the leaders talk about why they are doing this, why they are writing this declaration. It is because they are in the serious challenges to the world economy and financial markets. And they are arguing that market principles are essential for economic growth, employment, and poverty reduction. And then they give the reasons of why they are making this claim is because the failure to obey market principles actually caused a lot of problems in the 2008 financial crisis. In this declaration, there is no part about the counter-argument, but when you write your paper where you are representing a country's perspectives, you probably have to think about what other countries might oppose to your ideas or your point of view. So you do have to counter-argue. So here are the 5 parts of an argument. And before you start, I do have to remind that you have to keep your audience in mind and your purpose in mind. And I believe that all of you know that the way you write to your professor is different from the way you write to your parents or you talk to your friends. So do keep your audience in mind. And after you finish your argument, your argumentatory essay, you have to look back to your argument and see, have you considered all the perspectives? Have you persuaded yourself, etc., etc. Okay, I understand that it takes a lot of time to improve your writing and takes your time to make your writing with clarity and clear reasoning. And we do hope that our assignments and our trainings, workshops during and prior to the G20 Summit program will help you to improve these skills. So let's move on to the Q&A session.
取消静音。
Okay, let's continue our Q&A session. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Ross and I will be here to answer your questions. In the writing, you do not have to represent a specific country. You can just talk about important issue that you think. Okay, to clarify, the five components in the argument is a structure that's recommended by a lot of scholars, but you do not have to include five of them in your essay. You don't have to. You do not have to talk about the things among the three topics of the G20 summit, the sustainability, globalization, global security, and economic development. You do not have to talk about them, just to pick up topic that's very interested to you. So there is a great question. There's an Andrew attendee saying how to make people who doesn't believe in you to change his mind. This is very hard topic, but we'll give you some ideas during the pre-summit workshops. We will have a negotiation and communication as well as persuasion workshops addressing this issue.
when answering these questions, you can focus on any G20 country. So if you want to respond to what you think the United States should do, that's totally fine. Or you could also write about what you think China should do, or the European Union. Um, it to respond to the point of the new president of the United States, it doesn't have to be the focus. There's lots of different topics you can speak about, and lots of different government leaders you can speak about as well. To respond to the question about the most important thing is to keep it simple, I would say there's a lot of important things in completing this assignment. I think keeping it simple should be your writing principle, meaning it's important to talk about a global issue, and it's important to think about how this global issue could be addressed by G20 countries. I think in terms of writing style, and the principle we want you to keep in mind as you write is the KISS principle, which is to keep it simple, comprehensible, and understandable.
Okay, let me make a few announcements. So first announcement is that I believe most of you have created your Adomo account. Please do upload your Adomo profile picture so that you can look at each other, and you can also get to know each other better. And please do make sure to make your account name using Pinyin or English, so that Mr. Wiseman and other in our American teachers could know your name, and as well as your fellow international delegates. And also, I noticed that a lot of you are trying to read all the readings that we provided or recommended. The readings are actually optional. You can start working on your essay without completing all the reading materials. And finally, again, our due time for the essay is January 25 at midnight. Please do submit your essay on time. Thank you. All right, thank you very much, everybody. This wraps up today's presentation. And if you have any further questions, please leave us a message in the WeChat group. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you and good night.